Welcome to another broadcast of The Soul of the Everyman on the ArtistFirst radio network. All past broadcasts are available in podcast form. Find them at ArtistFirst.com. And here they are, your hosts, Michael and Margaret Lyons.
Thank you very much, Z-Man. And we would never detach from you. because we like being here. But we are going to talk about detachment.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you didn't even introduce yourself. I'm not detached from Margaret.
Hi.
See? And detachment is that feeling you get when you want to remove someone's head from their shoulders. You say, I want to detach that person.
Oh, that's a whole nother topic.
The type of detachment. But I think to be a little bit more serious, last week we had kind of a heavy topic, and so tonight we're going to make it a little bit lighter. But I think this is an important, it's sort of an important life skill. And to give it some perspective, I think when we're younger, we find it very hard to be sort of detached. We really want and we crave and we feel that we need, things in our lives, and we also feel that we need sort of the opinions of others, which is a different type of attachment. That you're less sure about yourself, and you kind of are looking for an affirmation of sorts, and that need for affirmation, and also the sort of parallel need for, or the sort of the concept of need for things, and sometimes those things are just decorative, or sometimes those things are necessary, and other times they're just kind of little bits of life stages, my first bike, my first car, my first whatever. But these attachments sort of creep up on you. The attachments to people's opinions, the attachments to things. And the life skill part of it is not that you become sort of crazy ascetic living on a mountain, but the life skill part of it is to learn that things and people are not how you define yourself, or rather those things and those people can't define you. You have an essential being which you mature into, and as you do, it behooves all of us to develop a sense of detachment, that this is me, the being, and those are just things, or they're just other people's opinions, or they're not necessarily There's detachment is an interesting word because it implies a separation, and you need to separate.
Well, when you're young and you're exploring your world, you learn what it means to be different, or boundaries. That's the beginning of detaching, understanding what belongs to you and what belongs to someone else or something else. They say when the baby is first born, it has to realize that mom is different from itself.
Yes.
That's the first major realization that, wait a minute, I'm not here alone. That's not just me talking to me. That's my mom or my dad, but it's usually mom because you're in utero and you got to come out. So
yes.
There's your real first detachment, is the umbilical cord.
yes, that's a good physical analog.
Mm-hmm. And then when you begin to realize that there are others out there, you have to figure out how this all functions. How is it possible that this person is different from me when we were together in some way? And that's where that whole setup begins to unfold in a human's experience. What does it mean to be apart? And what does it mean to interact? And as you mature, you begin to learn how to interact with other people and other things. And children, when they play, that's what they're doing. They're interacting with all different things that catch their senses, whether it's a smell or a sound or especially taste.
Hmm.
Taste is like the first thing. Everything goes right in the mouth. Like, how's that taste?
It's true, and I think that's that's exactly right. That we're born in attachment, and for a long time you don't identify yourself as a unique being. And by a long time, I mean that those infancy stages, and then there's the age of reason is often cited as around the age of 6 or 7. And at that time, or right around that time, you kind of assume a level of maturity that is your personhood. If you've been given the opportunity to develop boundaries, and everybody should be given the opportunity to develop boundaries, because although this is not the topic of this, there are lots of toxic relationships which are based on attachment. But we're not going there. But in a healthy relationship, parent to child, and as you grow, there is a level of independence which is encouraged, and that's a form of detachment. But the detachment we're talking about here is really something that you come into as part of your maturity. So as a uniquely mature person, or as a person who's becoming an independent being, you have to develop a level of identity which is separate and distinct from that which is put upon you, or that which you interact with, like you were saying, interacting with toys, that which you possess.
Yes, you are not the toy.
Right. You are not the toy. You're not the job.
Right.
You're not the degree or the makeup and you can see throughout life you'll see people who suffer from various forms of attachment syndromes. And in truth, all of us do. It's very difficult well, it's not difficult, but it's insidious. Attachment is insidious.
Well, it has to do with what is reflected back to us, because that is exactly what we're looking for, is a reflection of ourselves, believing that this is going to define me in some way. And it's almost as if you're using that reflection to establish your boundary, saying, well, gee, I have black hair and other people don't, and I have all these other features and other people don't. That's just the beginning of getting to know aspects of yourself. In a mirror, what you're seeing is what your physical body is reflecting back. And when you're little, it just is. This is what I look like. I got 2 eyes, I got 2 hands, I have a mouth, I got 2 ears. It's all okay. And everybody else has the same, but different. This is the beginning of understanding the differences that form actually has. Let me go back a little bit to detachment as a definition. In the Buddhist sense, detachment means that you are not the form that you see around you.
Right.
Okay? It's detachment from form. Now, most people will think of form as matter, a shape, a thing. But it's not the complete definition of form. Form is everything that you had mentioned before. You're getting your degree and it's this. Or you're thinking about certain things, so therefore I must be like this group.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually thought forms that you're supposed to detach from. And the physical body learns in the physical form and realizes that it needs to detach from these physical forms to keep the integrity of itself. That step has got to expand outward into one's own person, with one's mind and with one's emotions. And that's harder because it isn't tangible, but it is still a form or a thing. And that's where all the meditation and discipline, internal disciplines, are supposed to come in, for you to get to know the emotional form and your mental form.
Well, maybe what I like what you've done, because what we're really talking about is, before we understand this, we should talk a little bit about attachment. And attachment to form is, it's very seductive. We, as human beings interacting in the world, are attracted to form. And Tolle would say, that the essential being is that which experiences form, and his insight is that the essential being has to be a priori, before all form. You are a being. So without any form, you are still you.
Yes.
So he pares it down to the being in the now. And the Buddhists pare it down to the detachment of all, form from the mind. And in essence, they're both kind of boating down the same river towards the same island, if you will.
Yeah, just different shaped boats.
Different shaped boats, and that's fine. I mean, there are a lot of different shaped boats here. The point being, though, is that the attachment is not inherently anything. It's not bad. It just is. It's form, physical, and thought, and really all form is thought. And if you talk about people, the whole cadre of folks who do manifestation, it's all bringing through either word or thought into being or form. And so a manifestation is a uniquely interesting way of attaching oneself to things.
Right.
And the Buddhists and Tolle and many others would say that the process of attachment weighs you down. It weighs down your being. It weighs down your spirit, your incarnation, because each thought form, each physical form, requires from you something. I'm always reminded when they talk about that of the wonderful A Christmas Tale, Charles Dickens's, and you talk about Jacob Marley, and his spirit was dragging around all of his attachments, his money and his possessions and his things, and there's always that sort of moral judgment that these attachments are in some way a reflection of how little you lived. You poured all of your energy into things. It's not wrong, because to the extent that you allow your energy to flow into attachment, you dilute yourself. So the attachment is parasitic in a way.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's just understanding that this is all a tool by which you experience life. And you don't need to carry all your tools around all the time.
Well, that's true, yeah.
But that's what form is. When you cling to a certain form, and especially if you're clinging to a certain way of doing something, it's an ossification of almost a brittle crystallization of a thought form, and it's only going to be this way. I always think this way.
Rigidity, yes.
And it doesn't allow you to really experience life as it is. It creates this cage, because you won't take a step outside of that thought form. And that's what fear actually is. Fear forms that kind of cage to, you think you're protecting yourself, but you're you're actually making a prison for your soul, your spirit. Your spirit can't fly under those conditions. There's a part of you that understands that you want to fly, expand your wings, and explore, just as you were as a child, exploring different forms around you, seeing what works and what doesn't. There are thought forms and emotional forms that rise up, that you experience, but don't cling to. And it's why being in the moment is so important, because you let it go. You have the experience and you let it go.
Again, there's so much there. Going back a little bit, what you were talking about there was again, in A Christmas Tale, Jacob Marley talked about forging each link through his life. That the soul is fettered by these fear or attachments that it forges onto itself through fear, and the seduction of it, of course, is that you feel that without these things, that somehow you will be formless or exposed or without identity.
Without identity.
And Tolle's wonderful insight is to bring you back to what you just said. The way a child experiences things is both through immersion and in some ways attachment, but they don't have identity melded with the attachment yet. They haven't allowed the link to be forged to their spirit and to weigh it down. The age of reason, or when you start to mature and you start to somehow forge these links to your spirit, you infuse them with your life force, you allow them to identify you, is where the weight starts to come in. And I believe one of the things that drives people towards, let's say, Buddhist meditation or towards the power of now or whatever, is they feel the weight. You feel that your soul is burdened, that there's this constant, you mentioned emotional, all these emotional attachments, these thought forms, are constantly spinning in your head. That's, I think, the most common form of attachment. Although you see people with possessions, everyone is carrying around all these stories and these terrible emotional attachments, and the fact that in essence they take a situation which is happening and then plug in all this emotion and all this charge and all this negativity or all this prior experience and tell themselves the story of what's going to happen, and it's inevitably negative. These are all attachments too, driven by fear, driven by sometimes by anger as well, and dissipating you, weighing you down, clouding your essential being, because their power is derived from you parasitically, or you give your power away to these things. And as people feel that, they feel this weight growing upon them, they realize that at the heart level, the heart wants to be free of these things. We always talk about, you and I always talk about how the heart sees true. The mind loves attachment. The mind is all about attachment. Mm-hmm. And as the mind creates thought forms, because that's what the mind does, it's like, oh wow, another one. Just keep piling them on, because the mind is just all into thought forms and keeping them all going until it's just driving itself crazy, spinning at 1,000,000 miles an hour. And the heart looks at that and says, we're leeching our life into this. There must be something that can get us out of it. And it draws people to these crises, these, they say midlife crisis, but it can be a crisis of any type, crisis of faith, where you say there's got to be something more, and that's where they get into meditation, or they get into, let's say, the power of now, and say, yeah, all that burden. Totally always says it wonderfully. You let it go. Just it's gone. And he goes, it's gone. No, no. This little German nonsense voice. But he's so right. The 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 laying down of that burden is the thought forms is nearly as pleasurable as laying down a ton of brick on your back. You feel as though you can breathe again, as you can stand straight again.
Right. You are creating, how do I say this? As you walk through time, as your life unfolds, and you interact, what you attach to can become points of friction as you're flowing along your timeline. And it creates eddies and slows you down, heat. But understanding that you don't need to do that. And growing up, you get to thinking, well, I'm supposed to do that, aren't I? Aren't I supposed to care?
Yes.
Aren't I? You know, if I'm a good person, shouldn't I do X, Y, or Z? And the truth of that is, if you are living from your core existence, from your heart, that manifests itself, that expresses itself. Even in the Bible, it says, from the overflow of the heart, the mouth speaks.
Yes.
Okay. So if you want to know your state of your heart, what have you been saying lately? Because most people open their mouth and speak without actually thinking or choosing the frequency or the feel that is supposed to come through. And yes, you can actually choose that frequency from your heart. When it's unconscious, that's when you get all your mayhem. You know, I feel this, I feel that, I don't like this, I don't like that.
In all forms. In all forms.
So the peace that the heart is, because at its core and its purity, there is immeasurable peace. You can actually choose to express that peace. Now, it doesn't mean that you're not going to stand up to something or someone because they're doing something that needs to be taken care of or you feel is not right, heart right. But you speak from that point of peace and wholeness. You know, your goal is to come back to that state of peace when you speak. And it changes everything.
I love that, because in essence, the state that you're talking about there, the state of peace, is a form of a being state. It is a being state. It becomes a state of a point of detachment from form, but I think specifically the way the heart detaches from form is it provides itself a barrier. It says, yes, all form is there. The mind is still there. We haven't destroyed the mind, but we've ascended to a larger reality. We've encapsulated the mind with the heart, and we let the forms come up. And I think the Buddhists say it this way: they come onto the plane, and they circle around a little bit, and they drop off again. You don't exactly rise up. You don't allow them to to disturb that peace. And that peace comes from the heart. It comes up, and it becomes the enlightenment, if you will. But let's go back a little bit, because I think we've gone a little bit farther. So we've talked a little bit about attachment, a lot about attachment, about form. And the key is here, we were going to talk about some of the life skills. So detachment, people, I think, associate detachment with deprivation. They say, well, if I'm going to detach from everything, I'm going to be, I'm going to be sitting around in my bare feet in a dirt pile, with nothing.
In a cage somewhere.
Right, but in truth, detachment is a state of being, which means that you may have any amount of things or forms, whether it's zero or more than you can count. And the key is that none of those forms are identified with your being. Detachment is really the realization that the being is central to all things, that form cannot exist without being as the primary mover. You must have a being to have form. The mind loves to say form first, being after, because the mind likes to invert the triangle. The mind likes to say that it is in charge of all things. But without being, there is no mind. So we have this wonderful boss quote, which I think comes from the Gita, at least the internet told me that.
Okay, well, just one point before we go to
Oh, sure.
Quote. Detachment is not apathy.
Also true.
Okay, where you're not caring about anything at all. You just don't care about life. You don't care about people. You don't care. That's apathy. But that's not what detachment is.
Let's stay there for a second, because I said the detachment of things, but you're really talking about the detachment of emotion, and of thought, of caring.
Right.
And I think people associate that too. They say, well, detachment means that I don't care about anything anymore. I'm a nihilist. I'm practically suicidal.
Right.
If I'm so detached that I'm just going to kill myself.
Right.
No. This detachment is living life at so close to the moment of now that every possible second is precious. More precious. The more you live in the now, the more precious your life becomes. So it's the absolute antithesis of apathy. It's caring so much that it feels as though your life is infinite. Yet, not allowing you're not allowing yourself to be identified by the care or by the concern or by the love or by anything. All of it is on top of and empowered by the being, but is not the being, nor does it control the being. And that's the central realization. So you can be an enlightened, completely heart-centered and detached person, being, and be as rich as Croesus or as poor as a church mouse. Those things, you see, the level of riches or the level of cares, that's the key, is that doesn't matter anymore. So they say, well, I'll be so poor, I won't care about anything. No. Even those considerations are attachments. You're attaching yourself to identifying that rich means happy, or that that caring somehow identifies that you're a good person. Like you said before, people tell me I should care, because that's what the good thing to do, but that's all piled on top of the being as attachments, and they can be, the reason they weigh you down is they feel like control, and they are.
Well, the care part, it's again defining the word, because care for some people means that you've got to micromanage everything. And caring is part of the relationship. It's a heart-to-heart thing. And
let's take a moment to think about that. And we're going to care for Scott and the studio. We're going to go back and listen to a couple of commercials, and then I think on the other side we'll just be completely detached.
The Fat Man Gets Out of Bed is the latest book from Michael Lyons, the award-winning author of There is a Reaper. Featuring 13 original stories, this wide-ranging collection has everything. Forbidden love, gods versus demigods, weird invading aliens, sexy seductive artificial intelligence, and unusual passion between the living and the dead. All set amidst fantastic worlds of pain and loss and boundless joy. From the sublime to the macabre to the bittersweet, The Fat Man Gets Out of Bed will leave you breathless with laughter, brimming with tears, trembling with suspense. Available now on Amazon.com, Google Play, iTunes, Kobo, and fine e-tailers everywhere. The wait is over. First Blood, Book 2 of the Blood series is out. Your favorite bad boy thief, Dev, is back, and the beautiful and deadly Trey is right there with him. She is sharp, sexy, and full of surprises. Their adventures continue as a new power arises to threaten the world. The heart of creation is under attack, and time is definitely not on their side, as they battle against their enemies' undead hordes. Can they unlock the hidden power that can defeat him, or will his forces draw first blood? Get all 3 installments in the series. Book 0, It's in the Blood. Book 1, Destroyer's Blood, and the new release, Book 2, First Blood, today. Available in ebook and paperback format on Amazon, Kobo, Apple, and most other fine e-tailers.
The Timeless Esoterica radio program with Dr. Bruce is broadcast on the 4th Monday of every month at 8 p.m. Pacific, 11 p.m. Eastern on ArtistFirst.com. We explore topics including the paranormal, alien life, mysteries, conspiracies, hidden history, oddities, and much more. Each show will feature a special guest with exciting and thought-provoking discussion. Always keep an open mind, an open heart, live forever, and remember Dr. Bruce believes in you.
Rick Riordan fans, love mythology with plenty of action and humor? Destroyer's Blood is for you. The new fantasy novel by award-winning author Michael Lyons is Book 1 of the adventures of Dev Kalian, the Blood series. Follow Dev and his magic sword Betrayer as they are suddenly attacked and forced to return to Olympus to fight in a war they want no part in. The world of men and gods is about to be destroyed by Zeus's ancient foe, and only Dev and Trey can stop him. The conflict never stops, and the amazing twist will have you on the edge of your seat. Act now while the ebook is on sale for only 99 cents. Destroyer's Blood is available on Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, iTunes, Kobo, and fine e-tailers everywhere. And while you're there, get the free prequel, It's in the Blood, available for a limited time.
There is a Reaper is the story of 5-year-old Christopher Aaron and his life-changing struggle with leukemia. Winner of both the Indie Bragg Medallion as well as the reader's favorite silver medal for memoir, There is a Reaper has more than 100 Amazon book reviews and a 5-star rating. It has been described as life-changing, spiritual, a must-read. Just released on Audible and iTunes, this memoir is also available in paperback and on Amazon Kindle for only 99 cents. Get your copy of this life-changing memoir today.
You are listening to The Soul of the Everyman on the ArtistFirst Radio Network. Send your questions and comments to dj@artistfirst.com. Back to your hosts, Michael and Margaret Lyons.
Thank you very much, D-Man. And we're back for the second half of the top of the second half hour, and we are totally reattached. But before I forget, I do want to send a shout out to one of our fans who actually wrote us a hate mail or an email, and so we want to say hi to Heather.
Hi, Heather.
And we are totally detached. But let's reattach. Let's re-engage here. So, the I think that the attachment that we were talking about, and you were going to mention a little bit about the barriers that people put together, people put in place, and maybe a little bit. You might as well get into that a little bit now, if that works for you.
Sure. When you are forming your identity, one of the things you always do is go into, well, this is me and that's not me, and this is me and that's not me.
Mm.
And as you walk through life, you find different aspects presenting themselves. The attachment to things begins to form this barrier where these things actually form this, I don't know how to put it, almost like this wall, where it's this thing on top of this thing on top of this thing. This is who I am, and and this is me, and that's you, or that's not me. Anything past this wall is not me.
Right, and I think it's like a persona.
Right. It's the face that you've decided to create. And since we have social media, most people understand what that is. They want to create a certain face. But when you are in the moment and conscious and in the being state, that wall doesn't really exist, because your consciousness has always been. That is your eternal part. And the word that comes to mind, which the Buddhists use, is your radiant being. Where you are at your core, at your heart, radiating out life. And as you radiate out life, you interact with form, with things, with people. And instead of it being the stack of things that you've neatly put together, organized, saying, okay, this was this, and this defines who I am, and let me take the file out for that because this is my paper on who this part of me is. It's experiencing your walk and your interaction with the form, whether it be something solid or another person or concepts that you turn around to see if there is a, how do I say this? If it can hold some of your light. Because as your radiant form, as you're walking through your being state, you illuminate everything around you. It's not that everything is supposed to illuminate you. It's actually the other way around. And this is your creative part. When your being state interacts with form, your creativity flows, and there's nothing better than being in that creative state. So that heart light that radiates out, what you're doing is interacting with form and trying to see if there's a way to have a form that can actually hold some of the frequency that your heart is emitting.
I mean, that's exactly right, and I think that the most essential part there is that attachment isn't holding your light; it's smothering it. And interaction with form. People are saying, well, you have to not care and not interact with form. No, you have to understand that you are the being, you are the light. It is the essential you. And you are allowed, because you are your being and you own all of you, you are allowed to find form that can hold your light through your volition. And then you can your light is still all yours. It is now illuminating form for as long as you would like it to. Attachment is draining away your light because you haven't given light to a form. You've allowed a form to obscure your light. It's the difference between having something thrown on top of you, big sticky glue that sticks to you and smothers you, versus you being the candle. If you want to think of yourself as a bright light in a dark room, bringing light to form so that you can see it, enjoy it, manipulate it, give it some of your energy, but it gets your choice, your volition. And it goes back, we were going to talk about the quote, but let's talk about it now. The quote is from the Gita, and it says very simply that detachment is not that you own nothing, or not that you don't care, or that you're an ascetic somewhere. No, that's not detachment. Detachment is that nothing owns you. And the key here is that you, they're talking about you here, is the essential being, your essential light, the unique being that is you, that from which all other things and forms must be separate and distinct from. So the essential you, detachment is that you empower the essential you to reject the stickiness of form, but yet allow your light to fill form if you wish it to, and to take it back and say, this is me. I learn through experience in form. I may even grow. I may become a greater light, a more enlightened light. But yet, all of me is within my control. It's within my being. It is still essentially me. Nothing is attached, controlling, forging, falling, pulling me down, taking my life force.
Right. But that aspect that you're talking about is soul, where you're able to part or manipulate through will different aspects of it. But if you look at spirit, you understand that it is radiant, and always there. And it's not just about you at that point. It's understanding, making that connection of soul to spirit and being that radiant combination throughout all of your being. And you literally wind up being radiant through the physical body as well. But it's not about you specifically, because you're making that connection to the eternal part of you through the heart. And then your opinions, because people still, and especially when you use the word you, opinions are the first thing that usually pop right up. It has nothing to do with it. If we're speaking in terms of energy, it is the eternal light. Call it God, because this is something that actually words cannot encompass. Okay, we have an opinion where, whether or not we should use that word. Like, okay, what other word do you like to use? Understand, it's just a word that you're using. It's a form. You've given it form. Go past the form. Understand that it is something much, much greater, that you are connected to at your core, because it is you. Past form, past time, past all concepts of worlds and thoughts and feelings. Encompasses all. And since it is a core heart state, that is the definition of love.
Let me put a subtle question to you. So you mentioned spirit and soul, and then form, which is the world. Would soul be the first form of spirit? in essence, being is spirit, but yet soul is important for incarnation. It is a form of spirit, an individual form of spirit, and the being resides within the soul, and then everything else. And I think when attachment happens, you can never smother the light. You can smother the soul. This is the point you were trying to make to me. And allowing your light to radiate through your soul into form, or through that first form into lesser forms, which is all of creation and incarnation beyond it, or everything beyond incarnation. Would light encapsulated in soul be the first form, if you will?
It is your first interaction with the world of form.
Right.
It's that what do they call that? The interface.
It's the interface, and I think that's the essential barrier. If you say that you're encapsulating light in your soul, this is the definition of detachment starts right there. My light within a soul, then you have a detachment. And understanding that the key is that the key realization is that your being in your soul is not attached to form in any way. It can interact with form as a fish swims through water, yet you can remove the fish from the water and it's still a fish. It's not a happy fish, and that's where the analogy starts to fall apart, because analogy is a form and a bad one. So again, back, I don't want to get through. So detachment is nothing owns you. Nothing owns you is a nice way of putting it, but in real terms, is that we all know people who are burdened by attachment, and what happens is you no longer are living, you are being lived by the things and the thought forms. They're piloting you through your life. Your emotions are not in your control. You're endlessly living in the future and the past. You're endlessly worried about everything. Tolle describes this as his enlightened state, or his pre-being state, as being endlessly anxious, endlessly worried, endlessly thinking about the future, endlessly concerned about what was going to happen tomorrow, what happened yesterday. These anger and emotions, and his realization was that all of it has to be essentially separate and separable from the being and the now.
Consciousness.
Right. And so, as we mentioned before, the Buddhists come up in their boat, and Tolle comes up in his, and everyone else, there's many other ways to get to the island, but the island is nothing more than realization that all form is secondary to being, and the interface, the soul, is a good place to break it, to break this, to be separated right there. Don't allow any form to attach to your soul and thereby weigh it down.
But I'll go back to what I said before. This is love.
Yes.
This
absolutely.
is unconditional love. And it is not because whenever you say love, people immediately go into,
Eros, or they're talking about sexual love or Hallmark card love, or
Right.
So the problem is we only have the one word.
Well, yeah. Yeah. The sentimental aspects, and it's like to understand that love itself is that radiant form within you. It is life itself, and it is a whole heart participation. And this is why it's so important that the realization of, at your spirit level, you love unconditionally. Bringing that through to your soul is very difficult.
Yes.
Because the soul doesn't like a lot of things.
Right. Right.
I don't like you for doing that.
Right.
And why should I forgive you? Well, if you're going to take steps into the radiant form, forgiveness is your baseline. You understand that it's all past that. Because when you hold any offense against anyone, it immediately forms those walls.
And it's attachments. So before we go too far, because I mean this is exactly right, but I think let's give people some concept of how to apply. So a detachment is something that you can use as a life skill, and it's not apathy, as we mentioned. It's not this idea of asceticism. It's a, let's call it a mental discipline. And Tolle says you just take that moment to do nothing but look and not think. Let's say that that's one way to get there. More simply is we encapsulated with a little phrase. We said, you have detachment from outcome. Detachment from outcome is just saying, let's not dwell upon what could happen or think about what could be bad, what could be good, because this attachment is living in the future. It's living in the land of worry. And the other part of that, the sort of the converse part of that, is this detachment from the what could have been, might have been, should have been. And you just talked about it just now. That's forgiveness. When you forgive, or when you practice forgiving, you're letting go of the past, because forgiveness is all about someone offended me, and now I am going to be mad forever at them and never forgive them ever, ever, ever. Well, that's just leaving a part of you, a chunk of you in the past. And forgiveness as a detachment life exercise is letting that go and reclaiming your now, taking yourself out of the past where the offense happened, say that happened, it's over, we can never change it, we're moving on, we're in the now. And all the could have been, should have, what could happen tomorrow, and this and that, that's in the future. You have to say, okay, we're going to detach from that. We're going to detach ourselves from outcome. We're going to say it could happen, it might not. Let's just see. So these two things are severing yourself from the worry of the future, severing yourself from the unforgiveness of the past. And then we used to say humorously, but it does work, detachment from income. One of the huge, right? Detachment from income, because one of the huge attachments people have is to their income, to their, how much money is this? Money is a wonderful, wonderful form tool. We need it. We got to have money to do things. It greases the world. But attachment to money is they say the root of all evil, but it's really the love of money. And the attachment, that's the Jacob Marley. You're forging those links of attachment to money and things and possessions because A, you can't take it with you, and B, it weighs you down. It weighs down your life experience. So detachment from income, so detachment from outcome. You forgive, you take detachment from resentment, you forgive, you detach from income. And then the third one is you detach from what may come. Whatever may come, you say, I'm willing to be brave enough to not let my future steal from my now. We particularly learned this in the cancer wards in Memorial Sloan Kettering, because detaching from what may come, because everything there was about what may come, what may come, what may come, what may come. Detaching from that allows you to live and laugh and love and be, no matter where you are, in the worst situations, the gulags, the cancer wards, the streets of Calcutta. You can be a happy person. These levels of detachment sound difficult, but they're not difficult. You have to possess yourself.
Okay. What I just want to point out is you can be a joyful person.
Yeah.
Happy is dependent upon your situation. But I define joy as that internal state as opposed to depending upon what is external.
Exactly. And it's a fine distinction, but an important one. Detachment from what may come is holding on to joy, and what steals your joy is
Concerns.
well, I think it's even worse than concerns. It's this sort of insidious worm of, if I have joy now, I won't have joy later. So my joy now is like a guilty pleasure. I shouldn't be joyful because, then joyful won't last forever. So I shouldn't ever try to be joyful, because joyful won't last forever. And instead saying, yeah, joyful will not last forever. So gosh, you better enjoy it right now. Enjoy joy when it happens, and know that it's ephemeral, and accept it's ephemeral, and be joyful in that moment. The acceptance of joy is just as important as the endurance of hardship. But people will eschew joy in saying, well, you shouldn't be happy now because something bad could happen.
Well, it's again, for me, the definition of happiness is external. The joy is, once you tap into true joy, it doesn't change. Okay? That's my personal definition.
The key concept I'm trying to give people is that, as you said, joy is an eternal thing. Once you have tapped into it, you'll never be separated from it. But as a life skill, initially, people feel guilty about being happy because they think my happiness is not going to last forever. So then, therefore, why am I being happy when something bad could happen in a moment? That's this idea of detachment from what may come. Instead of saying, this is great, I'm happy right now, yay, let's be happy, like kids do. It's wonderful right now, so I'm going to be happy, and I don't care. But it's the I don't care of, I'm enjoying myself, and don't bother me about the next second because this one's good. Of detachment, of being in the moment, of a happy moment. If you string those together and realize the core, you're in joy and you never have this issue. But I think that's the second level up, or many levels up perhaps. The life skill is forgive. Stop worrying about the future. Don't live in the past, don't live in the future. Don't attach yourself to things, detachment from income, and enjoy the moment. Be happy when you're happy, regardless of where you are or what's happening around you, or everyone that's telling you shouldn't be happy. Bad things are going to happen. Who are the people that, no matter what, whenever anything good happens, say, well, tomorrow's going to rain. Shouldn't be happy now because tomorrow it's going to rain. Like, thanks, killjoy.
Yes, but that's the word exactly. A killjoy.
A killjoy. So
that basically is, the killjoy means that you are disconnected from the joy that is eternal.
And taking some perverse pleasure in reminding people that happiness is not eternal, or that joy...
Right. Happiness is not eternal.
Right.
But joy can be if you switch into the being state.
Yeah. So the key here is detachment is not apathy. Detachment is not asceticism. And detachment is not something which is unattainable. It's eminently attainable. It's empowering, and it's you literally relax into it. Detachment is powerful because it allows you to be rather than do. You are a being empowered by your detachment and your realization that you get to decide what the moment brings to you.
And for myself, you have to have faith.
And you have to have faith.
You have to have faith in God. So, we're at the end of our hour, and I'm Margaret.
And I have faith in Margaret. This has been the Soul of Everyman, and thank you for listening.